from Interstellar Command Guild. In this video, I'm continuing my part series, focusing on the healing Esper. And we're going to cover real quick a interesting setup that I sort of learned from drop 3 that I'm continuing to use in drop 4 now. Even though you're a healer, it's sort of interesting that you can still put out a lot of damage with the right setup, so to speak. So in this setup, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I have and what I'm using or whatever. The first ability I chose to put on my limited action set is Illusionary Blades. It's tier 7. It is similar to the way Soothe works, if you haven't watched my other videos. It's a charged up ability that, at charge 1 it generates 1 psi point. It does 2087 damage with my current AP. Charge 2 is, it does about 2283 damage and generates an additional psi point. Oh, I'm sorry. That's charge 3. Alright, sorry about that, guys. My bad. I'm a little tired. But, yeah. So, charge 1 is instant cast. It generates 1 psi point. Same thing with charge 2. If you can get to charge 2, it just does a little bit more damage. And still generates 1 psi point. Charge 3 does a significant amount of damage, so if you can get up to there, please do, because you'll see the best damage out of it. And it generates another psi point for you, so you get 2 psi points from this ability, max. The one downside to this ability is you do have to stay still to use it. So sometimes, depending on the boss mechanic and what's going on, you might not be able to use it. At charge 3 at least. But like I said, you can spam this on charge 1 and only get like a 4-second cooldown to do other things, healing wise or whatever. So it's pretty interesting. I tier 7'd it to get the maximum amount of damage out of it. The tier 8 is not worth going after because it's 5 more ability points just to get the tier 8 when moving from tier 7 to tier 8. So, plus the tier 8, it only does a snare, so who cares, kind of lackluster there. But that's tier 7 Illusionary Blades. The next setup, I have a tier 6 Soothe. Again, I used my remaining points. I had tier 4, but I used my remaining points here because, even though I'm losing a little bit of sustained healing, I'm gaining as much healing back as I can from Soothe. So it does a little bit more healing now since I went up to tier 6. It's also a charged ability, similar to IB, but you can move. And so you aim it and it heals you and 4 targets, so it heals up to 5. Next ability on my bar is Reverie. I tier 4'd it, but it's a spender, a finisher if you will, that does a good amount of burst healing. And yeah, it does a good amount of burst healing, but it's does the most burst healing possible at 5 psi points. And so you want to always try to use it at 5 psi points. If you have a couple below 5 psi points, it's perfectly fine. It's still burst healing provided. There is somewhat of a global cooldown associated with this spell, so it's not long. It's like 0.5 seconds, but it is noticeable, as you can't jump into another spell for a second or so. Just FYI. Next ability on my bar, I have Warden to provide a that little burst and sustained healing associated with it. And I tier forward it so it reduces physical and magic damage taken by 12 seconds for 6 seconds. Alright, so next ability is tier 7, Pyrokinetic Flame. The changes from drop 3 to drop 4 with this spell made it instant cast, as well as it buffed the damage it does. But basically what it does, the spell does itself, is you land the target, the telegraph on a target, and if it lands on the target without deflecting, it will create a 10-meter field around that target that heals your allies if they stand in it, and it does damage to foes if they're nearby. So the advantage of the spell now is that the tier 4, it's the same from drop 3, the only change being that it gave you 1 more % assault power and support power on the buff. So it's from 5 to 6%. And it's important to note that your allies only receive this buff if they receive a heal. So even if they run in it for a second and run back out, they'll get the buff for 4 seconds because it's based off of actually receiving healing. So, and I tier 7 this ability to get the most damage I could out of it. So here in a minute I'll do like a quick parse to show you kind of a roundabout figure of how much maybe damage you can expect. Of course, since the raid target's a single target, you will get single target damage, not AoE damage. So your damage will probably be more than what my add-on will show you here in a minute. To sort of finish out the rest of my abilities before I start showing you kind of what it looks like. Fixation base. I kept this because it does reduce cooldowns. 1, and it also gives you 3 side points. Primary reason we still keep this on our bar is for the 3 side points. The reduced all cooldowns thing is kind of cool, but it's not really 100% needed. As a lot of our abilities, other than with the exception of our interrupts have a long cooldown. They're like 34 seconds, so that's pretty long. But yeah, so I got base fixation. The next 2 abilities actually are totally up to you. I would highly encourage you to have 1 interrupt on your bar, just so you have some, usefulness to the raid. So yeah, I chose Incapacitate, just, my choice. You could choose Crush or Shockwave as your other ones. The thing about Shockwave, though, is you have to be in melee range or within 10 meters to be able to interrupt. And the last ability, I have a movement ability, Projected Spirit here. It's kind of just what I use normally, but in the case that maybe you're doing a boss that puts a debuff of some sort on your allies, I would change it over to Catharsis so that you have a cleanse. Fade Out is your CC break, so if a CC break is needed, by all means, jump on that. Restraint is very limited use, but it's a root. I've only really used it for the root it does to Omna ads and GA, so just FYI, that's another option for you for that last slot. And like I said, if you wanted to put another interrupt so you have 2, you can do Crush preferably and then Shockwave. But yeah, the only 2 abilities in the utility thing that I still don't like as a healer is Meditate and Geist. Geist does damage and produces threat, 2 things that you don't want really as a healer. Um, Even in this build, I still wouldn't use Geist. There are better options anyway in the Assault tree. Meditate. Meditate. It's not really needed. I mean, most of the guys in my guild that have watched me heal, in videos and whatnot, I very rarely go below 50%, 40% focus. Even in this build, I've not really seen much because the change I made from tier 4 to base doesn't give me the focus back. But I have more than enough focus region in my gear alone to in runes to do just fine. So anyway, that covers basically what I wanted to talk about in this video. Well, I suppose I should show you kind of what you look at to do with this hybrid build. Is you want to keep IB on cooldown, illusionary blades, and pyro. You always want to try to keep pyrokinetic flame on the target. It's very important to do optimal damage by doing that. Holy shit. Did Code just put plushies all over the place? That's awesome. Thanks, God. Oh, shit. Anyway. Yeah, okay. So our, I guess they're vegetables. Our token vegetable guys will be watching me do a little DPS with this hybrid build. Alright, so like I stated, your priority is to keep IB up off. Use it as often as possible. If you have to use it instant because you can't stand still in a situation, so be it. Use it for charge 1 and move on. But try your best to keep pyro on the target at all times. Alright, so I'm going to start with do this for a couple seconds and show you the damage that's done. Let me move my damage meter down a little bit so it's a little easier to see. And here we go. Alright, so I only did that for about a minute and a half, give or take. So, as you can see, like, charging illusionary blades up to charge 3 is going to give you the most damage. But at the same time, you have to gauge, is this a good time to stand still for that time it takes to get to charge 3 or not? You do have a lot of downtime in between these two spells to still do healing as needed. So it's not absolutely mandatory that you don't use any damage spells. But like I said, and the only things I'm losing by running these two things is really I lose a little bit of focus region from fixation because I didn't go tier 4. and I lose a little bit of side point generation because I don't have bolster and healing. Tier 4. So overall, I think it's a good setup. And it allows you to do enough damage to make it worthwhile running both of these. Because normally on single target, I'd probably do around 800 DPS. It's showing 1154, but as you can see, it's pretty strong. Pyro has gotten a lot stronger than it used to. It used to only do about 200 DPS at best, if not less. And illusionary blades, I'm not so sure about, but and it does scale off your AP. So, it might be something that on down the road I might consider going toward, guys, since the utility spells in those trees scale off AP and SP. It just so happens that illusionary blades has high amount of base damage it does, so I stick with that for right now. But I peaked out, I think, if I was somewhere around the 1600 range at DPS. So again, it's not much damage, but like I said, you don't lose a lot of healing by doing this. And if you can contribute more damage to the raid, you can down stuff faster. So especially things that require, I guess, of a DPS check. And it may be the difference between downing, say, a Kurlak or wiping. So it just throwing the build out there, and you like it, run it with it. If you don't, that's fine too. Anyway, that'll do it for me, guys. Thank you for tuning in again. Hope you liked the video, and we'll see you next time. Do a full amp setup, I believe, is the last thing I have left to do. As well as maybe a tips of the trade. I might include both in the same video. So, anyway, talk to you guys later. You have a great evening.